This is a real special privilege when we have one of these living histories. I think that Third Unitarian tends to attract a unique person with special talents and special experience. And no less than Barbara Miner, who through this process has, I hope, become a friend. It was a real pleasure getting to know you well. And I have a series of questions that I'm going to ask Ms. Miner during the presentation. And if you'll just bear with us, it's about 18 or 20 questions. So, and it's definitely animal, vegetable, or mineral.
Okay. So you want me to?
Yeah, I can start.
To your mouth. So
Okay. Oh, can I ask a first question?
Sure.
Yeah. Please describe your early childhood in Mississippi. That was Delta country and Sunflower County, that is, right?
Yes, I was born in Moorhead, Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta, and September 8th, 1940. That was Moorhead and Sunflower County is cotton land. Everything revolved around cotton, the cotton industry. People picked cotton, chopped cotton, they ginned the cotton, baled the cotton, and everybody's job depended on the cotton picking, cotton chopping season. And so that's what my parents did also. I tried picking cotton once. I never tried chopping cotton. I think I went two times, and I could never pick 50 pounds, but my brother could do 200.
Wow. And so I guess you tried to avoid picking cotton as much as you could. So what were your responsibilities?
It wasn't that I avoided it. I was responsible for taking care of the children. I had younger siblings. I had like 3 or 4 younger brothers and sisters that I had to take care of. My daughter said it would be considered child neglect or child abuse, the way that I lived. But I had to take care of the children. They had to go to work. And I was the oldest, the one left. I was the oldest girl. I was the oldest girl and the second oldest child of 8 children. So I had to take care of my younger siblings. I had to cook for them. I had to change the baby. I had to keep the children in order. I had to do all of those things. So I was very, very responsible at a very early age, like 7, 8 years old. These are the kind of responsibilities that I had. I had to cook food for them. So I learned to enjoy cooking.
Well, you got more practice because you started earlier. So your family went to the Baptist church in Mississippi. What was your attitude towards the church as a young girl?
Well, as a child, they would, they had all of these services, and you had the service you had the Sunday school, you had the service, you had the BYPU or whatever they called it in the evening. So Sunday was a special day. Everybody dressed up and went to church. So I remember I must have been about 7, 8 years old, and they had what they called a morning's bench, where during the summer they would have these services and they would try and get all of the children to join the church. And I remembered asking my mom what it was going to be like, and she said, well, they want you to join the church. She said, but when the Spirit hits you, you'll feel it. And that's when you join. You shouldn't join unless you really feel the Spirit. So I sat there and they preached and they went through all their stuff and everything, and all the kids got up and joined. But since the Spirit never hit me, I didn't get up and join. But my brother joined, so I said, Charlie, what did it feel like? He said, what? I said, the Spirit. He said, what Spirit? spirit. I said, Mom said the spirit's supposed to hit you. Why did you join the church if the spirit didn't hit you? He said, because everybody else joined. So, like, whatever everybody else does has never applied to me.
Your family left Mississippi in your 10th year. Can you tell us about your trip north and why you took it?
Yes, my uncle had been in World War II. My youngest uncle, my mother's youngest brother. And he came to Chicago when he came home from the service. He never came back to Mississippi. He always said Mississippi is a good place to be from. And so he never came back, and he ended up purchasing a building on Lawndale, 1317 South Lawndale. And when we came to Chicago, that's where we came. We had an apartment in the basement at 1317 South Lawndale. I remember when we left Mississippi, I was so happy in the car on the way to Jackson to take the city of New Orleans to Chicago. And it was so beautiful, the scenery, it was so beautiful and green and everything, and I was just so happy to be leaving. I didn't know where I was going, but I was happy to be leaving there. I always dreamed of a better life, you know, because to me, life, it wasn't normal. And I always asked, and since the time I was really little, like maybe about 6, 7 years old, I had asked my mom, why were black people treated so badly and we had so little, and we were all good Christians. Every black person I knew was a good Christian and loved Jesus. And it didn't seem like Jesus loved us back. And it didn't make sense to me. And nobody was ever able to explain that to me. And that's why I never could join a church.
Okay. In your 10th year, you find yourself in Chicago. How much of a change was that for you, and what was it like going to school there, or here rather than there?
It was quite different because I had never gone to school with white children before. In fact, even the areas were just totally separate. You know, like the white people lived on one side and the black people lived on the other side. And we never had any communication with white people, and most of us considered it a dangerous thing to communicate with white people because white people could do anything to you and there was absolutely no recourse, whatever they did. And nobody knew about it except for the people who were there. Like when things happened in those small towns in the South, only the people in the town knew about it. Until, like I lived in a town where there was railroads. And Moorhead was the place where the Southern Railroad crossed the Yellow Dog Railroad. So there were trains that came through Moorhead. And they had the workers on the trains from Chicago, they brought us the Defender. They dropped off the Defenders in all those towns that they came through. And when we had problems in our towns, then we would give them a message to take back to the Defender, and that's how it got in the paper, and that's how people all over America found out what was really happening in the South. So that was one of the good things about that. Other than that, people didn't know what was happening to us. Somebody was just dead. And nobody investigated. If they're black, they don't investigate because they don't care. So that's just how it was.
You were in the Defender?
No, like when events happening, or bad things happen, the people in the town would write a note, give it to whoever was on the train that brings the paper and that kind of thing.
Okay, so how was school in Chicago?
School in Chicago was great.
Where'd you go?
I enjoyed school. I went to Lawson when I first came here. I went to Lawson. At that time, there was so many people moving to the west side, in particular black people, and the schools become overcrowded. And at that time, Lawson had become so overcrowded until they needed more space. And there was Herzl Junior College at Lawndale and Douglas, and they had space. So they took the 7th and 8th graders from Lawson, and we went to school at Herzl, and I graduated from Herzl. And then I went to Marshall from Herzl.
And that's where you graduated?
And that's where I graduated from.
What were your first jobs?
Oh, boy. Like my last 2 years in high school, and during the holiday season, during the Christmas season, I worked at the post office. Then after I graduated, I can't see that.
You wrote it.
I can't see it though. I don't have on my glasses, my reading glasses.
Okay.
So after that, I went to work. My first job was at a knitting warehouse. They sold mail order knitting supplies, and that was my first job. I paid $25 for the job, and I made $1.03 an hour. That was my first job. And back then, they didn't have any problems with asking if you like, I remember once I saw a job listed in the Sun-Times and I called about it. And I didn't type very well, but I could do over 25 words an hour. And that's all it required, you know. So I called and asked about the job, and she asked me if I was white or colored. So I told her I was very colored. And she said, well, the only thing we have for a colored girl would be you would have to type 65 words. So they could tell you that then. They don't say it to you, they just do it to you. Mm-hmm. So.
Somebody's red Toyota has the lights on.
Yeah, it's mine. I'll fix that. Thank you.
Okay.
And then after that job, I went to Spiegel. I had already put an application in at Spiegel, and they called me for an interview. And I went to Spiegel and I interviewed them, and they gave me the job. Because it was more like me interviewing them. Is this a permanent job? And how are the advancements and all this stuff? So I got the job at Spiegel. I stayed there for 10 years. But during that time, before that 10 years was up, I had run into an old friend of mine. We had gone to high school together, and she was working for a jewelry company called Caroline Emmons. And she asked me to have a show for her, to invite some friends over, and I could get some free jewelry. So I went for that. And then after the show was over, she told me how much money she was making from this show. And she explained it all to me. So she recruited me into the jewelry company. She was trying to win a trip, and if she could recruit people, she could get the trip. So I went along with that, and I joined the jewelry company, and I was making big money with the jewelry company. So I started doing shows on the weekends. Sometimes I'd have a show on Friday evening. I maybe have 2 shows on Saturday and 2 shows on Sunday. I was raking it in then.
Let's backtrack a bit.
Okay.
Before we go into another subject, you told me something about your attitude towards money and a lifetime of frugality. Now, what would happen if you made $10 a week?
If I made $10 a week, I would have to save at least 2 of them. I've always been like that. When I first came to Chicago, my oldest uncle, Uncle Bud, he's told me, if you work on a job that doesn't pay you enough to save something, you shouldn't work. And I've always saved something, always. At Spiegel's, they had this so that you could take out savings bonds. I took out savings bonds. When we bought our building on Laverne, I cashed in savings bonds for my down payment on the building. And then when I went to the city, we could have money taken out of your check. So it's easier if you don't see the money. And I've always saved money.
So back then, you must have been quite a catch.
Yeah.
Good-looking, young, energetic,
Yes.
and always with some money. Back in '63, okay, you were riding the bus.
No, I was riding the L.
You were riding the L. Oh, well, this gets even more interesting. And you were on your way to see Malcolm X. And you met somebody on the train. You want to tell us about that? Didn't stop you from going to the Malcolm X rally, though.
Nothing could stop me from going to see Malcolm X. That was my favorite man.
You said he was your
Yeah.
Dr. King. You told
Yeah,
me.
he was like my Dr. King. Like Dr. King is to everybody else, that's what Malcolm was to me. But I met Frank on the L. I was going to 63rd and Cottage. It was some big place over there then. It no longer exists. And Malcolm was speaking, and I'd go anywhere to see Malcolm. But then I met Frank, and we formed a real good friendship and relationship. And we had a lot of things in common. Our age difference was great. He was much older than I was.
How many years?
Like about 16. And we got together. We ended up getting married and having a beautiful daughter.
You should introduce your family at this point.
Okay, this is my daughter Lizette, and this is my youngest grandson Solomon. The other two are away in college. Marvin is at Knox in Galesburg, and Imani is at Amherst in Amherst, Massachusetts. And that was a result of meeting Frank on the L on the way to see Malcolm X.
So after you got married, where did you first live? And how long were you married?
Oh, okay. I was married from 1964 until my husband died in '83.
Oh, 19 years.
And we first lived on Adams Street, 3445 West Adams. My parents had a building there.
Excuse me, it was 4356.
What is it? Yeah, what did I say? I'm giving my address now? Okay. 4356, thank you, Liz. 4356 West Adams Street.
That's just almost
Okay.
to Costner then. Yeah.
Yeah, right at Costner and Adams. Right. So we lived there until '72, and then we bought a building at 551 and 53 North Laverne. Is that right, Liz? So, and we stayed there until, well, Liz was out of college and grown and everything, and I left. I bought a house. It actually was a 2-flat, where I live now, 3445 West Fulton.
But that first building that you bought, wasn't there something special about how you bought it?
With my savings bond.
Well, you told me that at that time, people were not allowed to sell to black people.
Oh, well, no, that was Uncle Dan's building.
Oh, okay.
Where we moved when we first came to Chicago. That was at 1317 South Lawndale. That was a Jewish community at the time.
Yeah.
And they had clauses in their closing papers that they would not sell the building to a Negro. So the attorney that my Uncle Dan had bought, I hired to do his closing and everything. He purchased the building from the Jewish people who owned the building, and then he sold it to Uncle Dan.
Oh, wow.
So that was back in the late 40s when he bought that building.
Okay.
So
Can I
things got,
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a quick question? I'm trying to make her remember something. Did the same thing happen with Grandma's building? With
No.
Adams?
That didn't happen with Grandma's building.
No? Okay.
It was just Uncle Dan.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
okay, let me see. So you continued work after your daughter was born,
Yes.
that Lizette over there.
Uh-huh.
And how was working after she was born?
It was fine. I remember after she was born, Frank said, well, I guess you can't go back to work. I said, why? He said, well, who's going to take care of our baby? I said, Mama. He said, Mama can't take care of our baby. I said, she took care of me. So I went right back to work.
And then, so in 1977, you started working for the public sector. You want to tell us about your first job there?
With the public school. I started, I was always active in the community and all. So they were building a brand new middle school, Douglas Middle School. It was called later. It was called Austin Middle 2. They had built Austin Middle 1 over where Michelle is, which is now Michelle Clark. Austin Middle 2 is now Douglas. And there were two friends who were also active in the community. We walked through that building once a week to make sure that the building was going to be safe for the children to come in September, because they were supposed to open the building in September. So we walked through every week. So the gentleman who was going to who had been selected to be the principal at the school, he found out about us walking through, and so he decided he would join us. And so he started asking me about being his SCR, school community representative. So I kind of hesitated at first, and I knew that, I had skipped a lot of stuff. I knew that if I had taken another job, I could no longer be a branch manager with a jewelry company. So I thought about it, and then I just said, then I won't be a branch manager anymore. And I took the job. So, and then from that job, I went to Department of Human Services with the city. There was another one in between there. Between SCR, I went to the anti-crime program. There was a new program opening up in the community. And from the anti-crime program, I went to the Department of Human Services. And I retired from the Department of Human Services.
Can you tell us about your work there and give examples of some of the cases you worked on?
With Human Services?
Yeah.
Yes, I worked with, they called it crisis intervention. And we would go out on all kind of different cases, from rape cases to homeless, any kind of thing. Like somebody came into the city, didn't have any place to go, we would go and try and find them shelter. We had all kind of cases. And like I said, rape victims, fire victims. We would work along with the Red Cross. They would find shelter for them. We would take them to the shelter, and we counseled people and tried to help them that way.
And at the same time, while you were working, all these different jobs, and some of them, the last one that you had, that you retired from, that was especially challenging because of the hours.
Oh, yeah. Like when I first went to Crisis, we were doing like all 3 shifts. We would do a month of the first shift, a month of the second shift, and a month of the third shift. And that was really challenging. And we worked out of the police stations back then. And we were not centrally located. Some people worked out of a station on the north side, some on the south side, and some on the west side. And you had no say-so over what station you worked out of or what your hours were, so it was really kind of challenging. But in the later years, we became centralized, and we worked from a specific place, one specific place. All of the units worked out of one specific place. And then we had hours. We had regular hours, like first shift, second shift, and third shift. And I always had time, because I never abused time. I had so many sick days. I had comp time. I had comp days. I remember once I had gone into a hospital and I had surgery. I was off for about a month, and I just got a check like I was working. You know, like some people, as soon as they get a sick day, they use it. Or they make some comp time, they use it. But I always, like when I retired, I was ready to retire like the first of the year. But I had so much comp time up until I worked until October before I used up all of my comp time. Yeah.
So when did you, part of what you did was a lot of traveling, and when did you begin your world travels?
Well, my first trip actually was with the jewelry company. I had I joined the company to help Betty win a trip. And the next year, I won a trip. So my first trip was to Nassau, in the Bahamas. And then I won several trips with jewelry company to Vegas 3-4 times, back to the Bahamas. The next time I went to the Bahamas, I was able to take one of my fashion show directors with me, because I had become a branch manager. So I took one of my fashion show directors with me. And then in 1992, there was a travel agency out of New York that had what they called a culture tour, where they took people to West Africa. And my supervisor and I, Linda, at that time at Human Services, she knew that I always wanted to go to Africa, and she told me about it, and we checked into it, and we got the information, passports and everything, and we went on culture tour for 93 with the company out of New York. And I just enjoyed it so much, and I promised myself that as long as I'm mentally and physically able, I will go someplace on the continent every year. And so I started to seek someone in Chicago, a travel agency that arranged trips to Africa. And I ran into my good friend Eleanor Chapman, who has Africa Travel Advisors. And I started going with her. The first time I went to Ghana. No, I went to Senegal and Abidjan, or Ivory Coast. Yeah. And the second time, when I went with Eleanor, I went to Ghana and to Abidjan. And the next year I went with her to South Africa. And then she had asked me, like back that time, a whole lot of African people wanted to go back home and see what it was like. So she had so many trips going. I remember once taking a trip when we had about 70-something people, and she had like 3 or 4 tour guides with the trip. So she asked me if I knew anybody on the West Side who might be interested in helping her and taking groups for her when she couldn't go. I said, yes, I do. I said, me. And so it worked out because, you know, like I saved my time and I had time all the time, so I put in for some of my comp time to take a week off. So I always had time to go whenever I needed to go on a trip. And so I started taking groups for her. And I've gone all over Africa, North, South, East, and West Africa. My favorite countries are Ghana and Egypt. And I just hope that we will one day be able to go back to Egypt. There is so much history in Egypt. And if you ever go to Egypt, go to Abyssinia and you see the truth about history. When you go to Abyssinia, it's written in stone on the walls.
But in the midst of all your world travels, I want to take you back to the United States and your daughter Lizette. You sent her, though, to Jackson State in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
Was that kind of a homecoming, or how did that happen?
Well,
and how did you like going back?
Well, it really wasn't a homecoming. It's like they offered her full scholarship, tuition and board. Tuition, room and board and everything. So that's how she really got to go to Jackson State. But it was really an experience because I hadn't been back since I left there at 9, 10 years old. And I did get a chance to see it again. And the last time I was in Mississippi, my cousin had moved to Atlanta. And I had gone to Atlanta to visit with him. He was going to come back to Chicago and he was going to drive. So I bought a one-way ticket. I went to Atlanta and then he drove me through Moorhead, the little town that I was born in. And it looked so different. Because I remember like when we were little kids playing under the house. And when I went back, I said, how did we get under the house? Because everything seemed so little. But when I was a child, everything seemed so big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we digress and pick up a couple